This is David with BestRest Products, home of the Cycle Pump Tire Inflator that has a lifetime warranty. Today I'm doing part 2 on the Cyclops Evolution Turn Signal Safety Inserts. What this system does is it turns your turn signals into white running lights at the front and auxiliary brake lights and running lights at the rear. In our first video, we show a lot of technical detail. This is going to be an abbreviated version. And it's also going to announce a new feature that they have, which allows you to upgrade your old system or buy a whole new system that turns those rear turn signals into auxiliary running lights. The kit comes in a box like this. It has everything you need to do the installation. You'll have to wire into the battery. You'll have to run some wires to the front. You may have to replace your turn signals if you don't have the new style teardrop signals. We'll describe that very briefly. And once everything is in place, you turn on the ignition, and now at the front your turn signals are white driving lights, but when you turn on the signal they flash yellow. In the rear, your brake lights will work as normal. There's no change to the brake light itself, but the two turn signals act as brake lights, and they'll also act as running lights with the new upgraded version. The kit has 4 LED emitters, and there's a front and the two in the rear. They're marked. On the back of each emitter is a circuit board with all sorts of complex things in there. It's all solid state. And what you're going to be doing is pulling the wires off of the old signal lights, attaching them to this board, plus you'll run one additional wire into your turn signal, and that will control this LED emitter board. You're going to get a wiring harness, which may look complex when you first take it out of the box, but it's really not. I've kind of laid it out to make some sense. In the middle you have your connections that go to your battery. So you draw a 12-volt power from the battery, or you could draw it from a fuse block, fuse panel of some sort. At the front you have a harness, a built-in relay, and you have 2 wires that are white. These are the ones that will control those front signals and turn them into driving lights. These have to run into the turn signal stock itself and attach to that board. You also have a command wire. A command wire is something that you would hook into your electrical system, hooking into a wire or a circuit that is energized or hot when you turn on the ignition. When you turn off the ignition, it turns off that circuit. So this yellow command wire is what controls those front turn signals driving lights. At the rear, we have another section of harness. It's got a disconnect in the middle. That makes it easier to snake this in and out of the bike and make adjustments for frame parts, seats, things like that. But you can unplug this right here. We have a relay that controls the system, and we have 2 white wires that go into the rear turn signals. They connect to that board. And finally you have a command wire. It does exactly the same thing at the rear as the front command wire does. It controls the rear signal assembly and makes the system do its magic. You'll also get some special parts in the box. We have posi taps, which allow you to tap into wires. We have some kind of H-looking devices that help to lock the turn signal emitter into the turn signal housing. We'll describe that process in a moment. You get a set of instructions that are actually surprisingly good. Often you get instructions that don't really tell you what's going on, but Cyclops has done a good job of making these instructions easy to read. I suggest you go through and read it, take a highlighter, highlight out the important parts before you begin. When you do the installation, I recommend that you just lay this on the bike and get an idea of where everything goes before you get everything wired up, buttoned down, and then you try it. By laying it out on the bike and kind of doing a dry run before everything is covered back up, that will help you correct any mistakes you might have made to your wiring. But the process is relatively simple. The hardest part is taking off the tank panels, taking off the seats, snaking the wires. Depending upon your bike, that can take half an hour, it can take 2 hours. I've done a number of these bikes. The first one went easier than the second one. But I would allow yourself a couple hours, a couple of cups of coffee, or if you're with your friends, maybe a couple of beers in the evening to make the process go smoothly and quickly. So we've described the system. Now we have to get the bike over here and we have to do the install. Note that I'm installing this on a 2005 BMW 1200 GS. It's got some old style turn signals. They're kind of bulbous. It's an old style, no longer used by BMW, but I can still use these inserts because I've gone to eBay and I've found an exact match for the new style turn signals, and by simply swapping out those signals, now I can make this system work. If you watch our video, part 1, on the Cyclops turn signal inserts, you'll see all the specifics and all the little things that you'd want to know before you begin the process. But let's roll the bike over and let's get started. We've completed the installation of the Cyclops Evolution turn signal safety inserts on my 2005 BMW 1200 GS. We laid out the harness, we snaked the wires to the rear, we ran the white wires into each turn signal housing and connected it to the board. We ran the command wire to the brake light wire. In order to do that, we had to get underneath the bike and remove an access panel, identify the correct wire, and hook that up. In the front, we ran the harness up, mounted our relay, ran 2 white wires, 1 to each signal, and installed the modified turn signal housings, and turn on the key, and now what we have in the front is 2 brilliant white running lights that are coming out of the turn signals. They still act as turn signals and they flash yellow. In the rear, on this specific bike, we are not getting the running lights on the tail lights, and the reason for that is due to the age of this bike, it uses more of an analog style startup system, and so we still have our rear turn signals acting as brake lights, but we're not getting the running light feature. If you have a new BMW GS that has the magic spin wheel, then that has a different type of system, and according to the experts at Cyclops, when the system ramps up, that will cause the new relay to turn those turn signals into not only running lights but brake lights. But we don't have that feature on this bike, but if you have the newer models, you can get that. That is an option. I'm going to turn on the ignition, and you see the driving lights from the turn signals. When I hit the turn signal, we'll get flashing yellow, and I don't have the headlight on because on this bike the engine has to be running for low beam, but I'll turn on the high beam. Gives you an idea of how well these driving lights work to help see down the road and for other cars to see you as you come at them. Now remember that on my 05 1200 GS, I'm not going to get running lights from these turn signal inserts. Instead, the function for this will be the brake lights. And of course I still get turn signals, and if I have a turn signal on and I apply the brakes, you can see how that function works. This segment shows the running light features of the taillights on a newer thumb wheel BMW 1200 GS. Ignition on, and you see that the signals work as running lights. Now we hit the left turn signal and we have flash. We hit the right turn signal and we have flash. Signals off, and now we hit the brakes. And all three come on. You can purchase the Cyclops Evolution turn signal safety inserts from CyclopsAdventureSports.com or from BestRestProducts.com. Even though I run BestRest Products, I'm the cycle pump guy. I also work very closely with Daryl and the crew over there, and it's a top-notch company with great products, and I've got all of my bikes set up with their lights, their auxiliary lights, everything else, headlights. It's a good system. You won't be disappointed. You could spend more for lights, but you won't be getting more. This is David with BestRest Products, home of the cycle pump tire inflator that has a lifetime warranty. We'll see you on the trail. If you have new style turn signals that look like this, about that long, then you won't have to go through this process. But because we're modifying turn signals off of a couple of different bikes, we've had to scratch our head and make some revisions to the way the system allows the turn signals to mount. For instance, these are the stocks off of my 1200 GS, which is what we're doing today. This was the one off of my 800 GS. The bulbous design is not compatible with the Cyclops insert. It will only work with a signal that has this configuration. So how do we modify these turn signals so that we can make the Cyclops inserts work? We took the eBay turn signal stock and we pulled it apart to see how things work and how they configure. For the 800, it was a simple matter of just replacing the entire assembly. But for the 1200, I wanted to keep the longer stock because it gave a little bit wider spread on the signals, but I had to make some modifications. After removing the lens and the reflector and removing it from the bike, we can pull the end off. But to get this to fit onto it, which is what we want, we had to take a pocket knife and we had to carve some of the material off of one side of this stock end. It's not hard to do. You just look at the opening size of this, press this on gently, and then see where you need to relieve. And all the material that we removed was from right here on this one side. But there's two parts to this. When this goes onto the stock, it has to go on far enough so that when the insert is in place, I can then put in this retainer which keeps the stock end from coming off, or keeps the reflector from coming off. And when we aligned things, we found that this was not going to engage the way we wanted it to. So we go to plan B. We simply took 1/8 of an inch off of this portion of the reflector housing, and now by having trimmed that and having pushed this into place and dropping in the insert, now our locking H will press in and lock everything together so that we don't have anything coming loose on the road. There's one final step. This is plan C. What we found is that on these H locks provided by Cyclops, they are two pieces of phenolic plastic glued together. But because there's two of them, the thickness of it prevented the locking tab here on the end of the lens from hooking into place underneath here. You'll see what I'm talking about when you take these apart and start looking, but there's a small hole in here that this has to lock into when it goes into place. If you don't relieve the middle of this, and we used a small Dremel. We basically Dremeled out half of the thickness of this in between the two edges. If you don't relieve that, when you try to press this in, typically what will happen is you'll break this plastic tab. And we did a number of those breaks, probably broke 3 or 4 of them before we figured out this process. Understand that you won't have to do this if you're working with a stock BMW or KTM or similar lens assembly that has this configuration. But we're providing this so that you will have all the information that you need to make these conversions. Once again, on my 800 that had stocks like this, I just simply replaced the entire assembly. I didn't have to do any MacGyvering to the stock. But on the 1200, to keep this longer stock piece, I relieved this with a pocket knife. I put it on. I realized that the alignment of my H bar was off. In order to accommodate that, I marked 1/8 of an inch on the end of this. I took a Dremel and I cut that off 1/8 of an inch. And now when I press this on, everything's in the right alignment. This locking piece fits. My lens tab will go in without breaking, and I'm ready to put this on the bike and do my wiring.